with my E30, or at least one of two. This particular car I've had for a number of years. It has a 3-liter M54 in it currently with a Getrag 250 behind it. It's a pretty basic setup. I mean, I built it in mind to be something I could use every day if I wanted to, and still be able to pass state emissions testing here in Tennessee. Brief walk around it. You'll have to ignore my temporary exhaust tip. I've had a bit of exhaust intrusion into the cabin, and I've been playing around with some tip length and basically trying to get the exhaust gas out into the airstream. It'll get sucked away from the car. But the car itself, the chassis is an 85. It is a US spec car. The Euro bumpers and front valence and stuff have been added. But it is 5-lugged. These are E34 weaves that are on it right now. I've got some other wheels that I'm going to put on it soon, which are Style 3s off of an E32 that I just refinished and wrapped in some RS4s. So as far as where the hood's up on this today, after doing the 5-lug swap, we are in need of a bit of a brake upgrade in the master and booster department. So here we have a 944 booster, which you still can get new from ATE, at least as of recently. And this master cylinder that would go to an E32 750. That's a 25mm bore master cylinder versus the early E31s, which were kind of weird. They're not like a straight 23.5. They're 23 or 22.5 than a normal E30 is. It's not any of those. They're biased differently. This car had drum brakes originally in the rear. So I went ahead and just got rid of all that, and we're gonna put new stuff in. The original booster leaked anyway. I had some idle problems that never quite made sense until I figured that out. But a wonderful engine, albeit slightly disassembled right now to be able to fit the booster in. So as far as getting the rest of this in, I've got to finish bolting this down. The fun part's going to be, I've got to build a T to tee these together. This is our front and rear brake feed. Now, for those of you all that are wondering, no, there is no ABS module here, and there has never been one. This being an 85, that was a 4-cylinder car, it did not have ABS. So we're then left with a dedicated rear brake feed, a left and right front feed. We're going to have to bridge together to make this wonderful package work together. Okay, so after a bit of searching, I was able to find a brake tee. I believe I have this on another car at some point, because it's in my parts bin, all my hardware. But go ahead and get that bolted up, and then we'll see if we can get a line fabricated. Okay, so we've got the master cylinder in, hanging out in there now. And I'm gonna have to build a connecting piece to go from there to there. It's gonna be fun. Got some nickel copper line on hand that I'm going to use, so let's see if I can't fabricate that up. Okay, so come over here to the work table, and we're going to be making a bubble flare today. Now, for those of you that don't know, bubble flare basically looks like this. And there's a slight dome to it. It's used on a lot of European vehicles. Different to like a double flare that I believe you see on a lot of Japanese stuff. I don't work on a lot of Japanese stuff. And it's definitely different than like a single flare that you would see on a lot of American vehicles. So with this, this particular piece of hose, just one I kind of found in a parts bin, it had a bend similar to what I'm needing. So I need basically that portion up to that little line that I marked. So I'm going to see if I can go ahead and cut that off and go ahead and try to flare this thing. Just a standard brake line cutting tool for this. This one came from an AutoZone I used to live nearby. Alright. I'm going to have to reuse this end because I am currently out of wonderful little threaded fittings. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that off with a pair of snips, actually. One good thing I can say about nickel copper line is it's really easy to manipulate. You can do most of this stuff without a bender. Also, if you're up north in the Rust Belt, you're very familiar with the other benefits that this stuff has to offer. So at least with the tool I've got, which I want to say I just got this one off Amazon, basically you've got kind of like this, I don't know, kind of like this block thing here that you'll tighten everything down on. At least they refer to it in the instructions here, the flaring bar. And your line, using this tool, needs to be flush with this. It's very critical to making this work. Once you've got it flush with the flaring bar, go ahead and use the tool. Tighten everything down. So you could use any other flat object with this. Or if you have vice grips for hands, you could also crank down on that. But I don't. Well, now that we found what I dropped, go ahead and thread this onto the flaring yoke. Put this on here. And we're just going to crank down with it until we get a flare. We just want to make sure that's on first. If your fitting isn't on, you having to do this all over again. I would definitely admit to having done before. And now that we're done here, we have a nice little bubble flare. Let's go get it on the car. So we've got this on the car now. I ahead and got everything torqued and marked. So next step for this is going to be putting the reservoir back on, which we're going to be able to use a standard e30 reservoir for this. We're going to run our clutch line back in here the same way we had. I'm going to throw a little double zip tie action on that. It's kind of loose in there. I don't really like that. Then we're going to have to make our way back to putting the manifold back on. Though it is tomorrow now, I've got the manifold back on. Kind of a nice added bonus from running this master and booster combo is I've actually got some clearance right in here, which I did not have before, as you can see by the dent in the intake boot. Another nice addition from this. But I'm waiting on the reservoir now. I've got it in an ultrasonic cleaner. Has kind of some nasty stuff in the bottom of it I wanted to get out. So we'll get that clean and throw it on. And I think we're going to have to put it up in the air and go ahead and bleed it out. So these are the wheels we're going to be running once we're going to swap out when it's up in the air. setup on there now has got Blizzaks on it, which is not exactly optimal for, you know, spring. So get some Style 3s that I refinished. They've got some RS4s on them. Should be a pretty good setup to run for this spring, summer, and part of the fall until it gets cold again. So in the air now. We're using this tiny self-bleed tool today, which refers to itself as the Bleed-O-Matic. Basically, you fill this up with a little bit of fluid, probably up to like bottom of that wording. There's a tube inside of it. You put that on the bleed nipple, open it, and then start pumping the pedal. Since you have fluid here in the bottom, you can't suck any air in, and it'll simply just push the fluid through into this until you eventually get clean fluid coming out. You could do the two-person method if you have two people, but I don't. So we're going to use this today, because that's what I've got. Okay, so this wheel's bled. Now, an important tip to note, you see all the fluid there, what you want to do in order to make sure that the job is done correctly is to go ahead and overfill that. That way all the fluid will spray out of the vent hole up onto the shock and other suspension components. That way, when it's time for you to put your wheels on, you'll have had to spray this down with the water hose, so you'll be setting in water when you go to put the wheel on. That's very important to make sure that you get the proper experience of having done this job. With that in mind, this wheel is bled, and we're now going to go ahead and move on to the other rear wheel. In the case of this E30, as all E30s are, the rear brake lines are teed together. There's only one rear brake feed, so we'll do those in series to each other, and then we'll go ahead and move up to the front and do those. Okay, so I have got it bled. Actually fired it up, went ahead and let it run for a minute. Spraying the oil, did an oil service while we were here. So I used this Castrol Edge. I'm personally a fan of that stuff. I know everybody has their own oil preferences, but it's just kind of what I prefer to use. I did find one thing while under the car during the oil, though. I'm going to have to address that. And that is the CC belt. It is kind of off the pulley a bit. So I don't know if the tensioner pulley is crappy, which it kind of looks like it. But if nothing else, we're going to have to get another belt on this for today, because I don't want to lose my air conditioning. So things have escalated a bit. Got the AC bracket and tensioner assembly off. Got a few problems here. This pulley, for one, really isn't round anymore, so that's not optimal. It's not really the biggest issue. Bigger issue was more of an error I made, in that this is a bolt that came out of that hole right there. Now, you will notice, if I can ever get them wind up, a little bit shorter than that one. That, though I don't think is exactly what's supposed to go in there, is a lot closer, within, you know, probably a millimeter or two. That did not have really any thread penetration at all, or at least barely any to go down in that hole. So I'm going to order a pulley. Though I do want to go ahead and fix this while I've got the car in the air, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back on. So I can swap a pulley with it in the car, but I would prefer to go ahead and have everything else squared away. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can tap that out. So we've got the Mate 1.25 tap. And we're going to see if we can hopefully clean up what is down in there. Fortunately, that still feels pretty good. So, go ahead and run that all the way in then. Oh, yeah, that's good. Should still have usable threads, which is excellent. Get a little bit of junk out of there. On a face shield and blow that out. So, that nice and clean in there. Try this with some proper depth hardware. Alright, so upon reassembly, I have been confronted with an issue that I never encountered when swapping the car initially. Now, it's worth noting that M54 swaps aren't really something a lot of people do. Most people just do standard M50, M52 stuff. So I'll put this out there so that you know. This here on the dampener is the 4-rib pulley. This over here on the compressor is a 5-rib pulley. I did not really pay any attention to that when putting this together, because I've had a bunch of M50 and M52 variants of motors in and out of this car, so I just assumed that it would be the same. Though, you know, the problem there is I assumed something. So what we're going to do, this is not exactly right, is I'm going to buy a 4-rib belt, and we're going to run it on here anyway. We will have one spare rib left, but it really shouldn't affect anything. Basically, the belt has been trying to walk off because I've had, I've had one rib laying over that, and when I put the belt on last time, I didn't even pay any attention to it. I just threw it on real fast and kind of went about my day because I had something else I was trying to do, which I should not have done. So I'm gonna go get a properly sized belt. So I thought I would take a minute to finish this video off by giving you all some in-car driving footage, kind of to illustrate exactly what the brake booster and master upgrade have done. So the car does have a European cluster in it, therefore you're seeing everything in kilometers per hour and the fuel's in liters. Worth noting, that way you can kind of judge how quick the car stops by how much I'm having to modulate the pedal. So here we go. how weird it is having an electronic throttle pedal in this car. You know, after all the years of driving it with conventional cable throttle, like even though I know the car has an e-throttle, and it's had an e-throttle for over a year, a lot of times when I go to shift it, I'm still expecting it to feel like it's got a cable. It's rather unusual, really. In a lot of ways, I wish that the M54 did have a cable throttle, but I know it's not having it's going to make things like cruise control here easier in the future. Unfortunately, I can't get that yet. I'm going to have to add in an ABS unit like a Mark 60 to get there, but that is definitely on the list of stuff that's got to happen. Light braking, stuff like that, I'm just barely having to tap it, kind of with the binders on. It does not take a lot of force at all for mild stops. I like that a lot when it gets into a more aggressive stop, though. And once you get into that, you kind of do have to hammer down on the pedal more. It allows you to modulate brake feel, or brake force, I should say, really well. I'm yet to get this on track, but I'll definitely try to do like an autocross or two in it this year. I think I'm really going to like it for that. Provided somebody builds a course that actually takes braking. Stop there, I needed probably half, 3/4 of an inch of travel. Overall, the 3-liter M54 in this car is, to me, it's really the perfect power plant. I mean, I've got this car started think the Style 3s have become an excellent wheel choice for the car. I did get rid of the temporary exhaust tip. Got a real tip now, which, yeah, it sticks out a lot, but I don't want to suffocate. I just kind of mimicked it off of a stock tip for an e30, just a little bit bigger. So up here we've got a nice amount of clearance between the master cylinder and the intake boot nail. Everything in here has worked out pretty well. Quite happy with it. So yeah, overall, I think going 5-lug the way I did was worth it. Definitely doing the wheels and tires is worth it. And I'm very happy with the 750 Master at 944 booster. I cannot recommend that enough. Hey, so thanks for taking the time to watch. If you like what you see here, please like, subscribe, tell your friends about it. We got a lot of interesting stuff coming up this year. So we'll be going to the Vintage in about a month. Shed Car has got to get put together as well. You'll see some upcoming content on what that is shortly. The TI that is in the background of the video, the multicolored one, it is going to get rebuilt. And we got some other stuff as well that we'll get to when we get to. Should be a pretty interesting year for us. Thanks.